Welcome back to Humans of Ethereum. In this episode, I have a very fun conversation with designer and community builder extraordinaire, Peter Pan. Peter has played a very pivotal role in helping launch the Metacartel community and DAO, which is completely focused on achieving mass adoption of Ethereum and Web3 by supporting great dapps. And they've already begun to do that by issuing some grants out of the DAO. The Metacartel DAO is very exciting also because it's the first successful fork of the Moloch DAO. In addition to DAOs and forks, we talk a lot about memes and community building and a bunch of design-related topics as well. I'm sure you'll enjoy. So without further ado, let's kick off with episode 9 of Humans of Ethereum featuring Peter Pan. Sweet. How's it going, Peter? Long time no see.
Good. How's it going? Yeah. I saw you last time in like a month ago, right? In the WASM event in Berlin.
I think it was more than a month ago. Time really flies.
Yeah.
And
true.
I've been around the world since then. You probably have as well, although I'm like not traveling now for a while.
Yeah. So
wait, so are you living in Australia? Are you living in Berlin? Are you just like splitting your time? Like, how do you make that work?
Right. So I've been like nomadic for the last 2 years, moving from like Australia, China, between like Guangzhou and Shanghai and Hong Kong and then to Berlin. I have family in Australia, Sydney, and I have family in China. And then Berlin's just like, I've been here, started coming here last year because of the crypto scene.
You have your crypto family in Berlin, right? So it's like family everywhere.
I mean, it's strange because I'm kind of like moved here, right?
Yeah, because I always see you there, and I feel like every time we chat, you're in Berlin, so I'm a little confused. But
I try to move here this time, right? But I can't really do Berlin because I just feel like there's too much life in the city, right? As Peter Thiel said it, Berlin is a place where young people go to retire, and I haven't
heard that before, but I like that a lot. That's clever,
right? I think it's a great city, and I enjoy it. It's a great, it's very mesmerizing. It's a peaceful lifestyle here, right? But it's too slow pace for me personally.
Yeah.
And, and I realized being here for like, just a couple months now with like the mindset of let's try to kind of live here. I realized that, crypto is way more, distributed than I realized being here in Berlin for a much more extended period of time. Right. And most of my work and the people and my team at Metacartel, right, are still in the US, is still fully distributed, right, across Europe and US. And I realized it hasn't mattered, back in Sydney, I was living a life where I was living US time zones and European time zones. I was waking up at lunch, like 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. and I would be sleeping at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, right? And because I'd take calls from like 1 a.m. to like 5 a.m.
Yeah,
right?
we've been on those calls before when I was in New York and you were in Sydney, and I was like, what time is it over there? I did this recently as well. I was in Europe, following on when I saw you in Berlin.
Right.
And I had like 4 or 5 days leading up to when I was heading to the West Coast from there. And I was like, I'm just going to try working West Coast hours. And it was weird, but kind of cool at the same time.
Interesting. What did you work in? Like, what was the time like?
So it's plus 9 hours. So basically that meant I was waking up very, very late. So I was waking up at like 3, 4 p.m.
Wow.
Which is the equivalent of like early morning in San Francisco, and then just staying up like late into the night kind of. But funnily enough, when I was there was when this crazy heat wave was happening. And so it was actually kind of nice. I missed the hottest part of the day, and I'd like work for a few hours. I'd go out to get dinner at like 9 before everything closed.
Yeah.
And it was like cooling off at that point. So let's do things in the right order. So let's kick off. Thank you for joining Humans of Ethereum. I'm really, really excited to have you on the show and the podcast. I think you're an important human in Ethereum. So why don't we start at the beginning? Introduce yourself in whatever way you think would be most interesting. Right. And in particular, make sure you tell us what you were doing like before getting into blockchain, crypto, Ethereum, all that stuff.
So introducing myself, I'm Peter. I'm known as that guy of the Matrix. I have this like profile photo that looks like I'm in the Matrix, right? I'm Peter with a free pan, right? Peter Pan, but with a free in the middle. I'm just like another guy on the internet, right? Wandering about doing random shit,
which I love, by the way, because the point of this series of conversations, at least this season 1, right, is to chat to random people on the internet, random guys and girls on the internet.
Very cool.
That's the whole point, because there's a small number of people and projects we hear a lot about, but like my focus here is talking to people that don't have as much visibility, aren't as loud on crypto Twitter, et cetera.
Right.
Although you're fairly loud on crypto Twitter.
I have my fun on Twitter, right? I don't take it too seriously. I don't take Web3 too seriously. It's really just me on Twitter and Telegram, and Zoom calls most of my day, doing random things, doing interesting things, trying new things out, right?
Sure.
I guess I'm part of the core team of Metacartel, where
Hang on.
right now, yeah,
Tell us before. I want to know your backstory. I want to know like what you
right,
were doing before.
uh,
What did you study? Where are you from? And then how
right,
did you
right.
get into the backstory is super important, I think, when we're talking about the human story.
Right, fair, fair. So essentially, um, I got up right. It's well, yeah. So essentially,
Well, you had a life before crypto. I know it's hard
yeah,
to
I
believe,
did,
right?
I did. It's crazy. It's been a long time, but you know, um, I'm thinking about where to start because this is such a weird question that I've never been asked before, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, but before I get into crypto, which was like the first time I heard anything aside from Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Like the first time I heard about Ethereum was like back in late to mid 2017, right? When the bull run was happening. My brother was like,
Right.
hey, yo, invest into Ethereum. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Why not? He's made some money. I'm like, then as I like kind of just threw some money in, I realized, whoa, this is some really cool technology. I didn't know that there were anything other than just like Bitcoin, right? And I started like learning what is like Golem, what is like S&T, what is Orga. I'm like, what the hell are these things, right? And as I dug deeper, it was like I kind of got mesmerized by the computer science aspect of like how intricate these like crypto systems were, right? And yeah, and at that time I was still I was still working as a designer,
Right.
a UX designer more specifically on a project called Cancer Aid, right? We were basically building mobile applications for cancer patients where cancer patients have this there was a recent study released where cancer patients actually improve their chance of like surviving and prolonging the period their life essentially, right? If they reported the symptoms and just the symptoms to the doctors in real time, right? There was a study done with 400 patients
Sure.
with severe and aggressive cancer, and it was a double-blind study, and one side actually had like around 4 extra months extra, to kind of like deal with and fight and live for, and that was pretty significant, right? So we were
Wow.
building these products, right, that wanted to collect data from patients and deliver them to hospitals and clinicians and doctors, right? And it was essentially like, a lot of my job was talking to cancer patients, right, understanding like what is it like, right? And like I obviously couldn't know, but my job was to understand the whole journey, right? From like treatment to remission to like curing it, or etc. And just understanding every step of the way. I sat in the reception rooms, sit in the same reception rooms for like an hour or 2 hours, just understanding what it's like to sit and wait, right? Walking through the same hospital doors, just kind of being in the same areas, right? Picking up the brochures, reading what the brochures were like,
Sure.
getting the form, the documentation that needed to be filled out, and just like understanding everything about it, including the caretakers, what questions they asked, what basically as much as I can about everything and everything, right? I felt like there was a lot of like user research, which is like a very good role. I feel really good fit with me because I'm naturally very curious, and I just I get into the granular details, right? And I like to learn about random ass things, which may often not have an objective to, right? Just for the
Sure.
pure purpose of learning. And before then, I was a designer as well, and yeah, essentially just like previously, so not yeah, so essentially previously, yeah, I had another design role, and before then, I've just spent some time in design, and I used to build I used to build up I mean beforehand I built an online design community as well, right? Called the Logic Network, and that was almost like I stumbled into that, building that designer community as well. We were running a YouTube channel where we showcased everyone's work, right, on YouTube. And, I just had this giant, back then in 2015, 14, 13, 12, right, everyone used Skype. And so we had
Oh
these like
yeah.
huge,
That's right.
yeah, so we had these like huge Skype kind of meeting rooms, right, where people would talk just like Telegram rooms today, right?
Yeah.
And back then, I was doing a lot of work around YouTube and running these YouTube online design communities, right? And I was also heavily involved in like say these esports, like Call of Duty design teams, right? I'm not sure if anyone knows about Phase or Soul Clan or, Obey, whatever, these YouTube card trick shotting clans, right? They have like a design team. And there's like this sub like culture that exists between 2012 to 2015, right? Where, these teams that have design teams, they all kind of be like gangs, right? Where they show off their work, they collect the best designers, it was kind of like a gang affiliation within the online YouTube design scene.
That's so fascinating. That's I love these like subcultures, these niche communities.
Yeah, like it was wild because I never thought I would ever, like, that was a period where I met so many people, built up a great community, and people, it's like this community, like logic, right? It's strange because it's very similar to Metacartel, in my opinion, right? Like the community I'm now kind of working on, but beforehand, right? Like people sharing ideas, critiquing each other's work, collaborating, and posting more, getting feedback, sharing clients. And this kind of community was a part of this larger community that shared the same behaviors, right? And this lasted between like 2010 to 15, right? And the thing is, it kind of eventually died out as one kind of moved on, right? But the thing is, I never thought I'd actually like encounter such a community. Like to me, those were the golden ages of like YouTube design scenes, of the YouTube design scene, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I'd never actually encounter such a vibrant, such a collaborative, such an open community,
right,
such a passionate and dedicated community until I went and encountered crypto again. And that's almost like a huge draw, was that it's almost like I remember these golden ages, but then like I start joining, I start engaging with the crypto community, the stream community, and it's almost like I feel it's like I get the sense of intense sense of like deja vu, right? Of like,
it's really interesting.
Oh, this is happening again. Like,
I think there's been a theme here. It's interesting as I've done a lot of these conversations and interviews. One thing that keeps coming up again and again is games, and maybe that's all because we're just like young and have a background of playing games in the 90s in my case, or in the 2000s or whatever. But it's funny, like I was very deep in a lot of these online gaming communities when I was in high school, and at that time it was things like StarCraft guilds and Diablo clans and this kind of stuff, Quake, that kind of stuff, right? But also that same very strong sense of community and people who like, I mean, it's almost weird to say it today as a, quote unquote adult, right? But like, these were like truly my friends. They were the people I hung out with every day. I'd like race home from school. And of course there were no cell phones. There were no smartphones back then. So I'd jump on the computer and be like, hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? I missed you guys. That's one theme that seems to have come up again and again in these conversations. I think that it's something that many of us have in our past. It's like a shared like cultural attribute. And I'm beginning to wonder to what extent that's influencing our, community that we're building. So let's come back to that because that's interesting. I just wanted to mention a couple of other things quickly. Number one of my favorite things about these conversations is learning about people's backgrounds, like things I didn't know. So another example is like I've known you for a long time, but I had no idea that you were doing like health IT previously. So I also was, right? So I had like a healthcare startup, and like what you were describing about understanding the patient journey or the customer journey, like the kind of UX design process. It's so important, and it's like, so relatively undervalued in our community. I did a conversation with Beltran a few days ago, and we kind of talked about some of this stuff as well. So when you and I first met, I was like really impressed by that design background, and just I think how important it is to like have that design thinking in our space. Like the thing we're missing is that product thinking and that customer journey understanding. So you talked about, it was your brother, I think you said, right, who had been like interested in like Bitcoin and stuff?
Yeah, he's a dentist, and he's like he bought into crypto a while ago, not a lot. He's just like been investing random stocks.
So what I want to ask is, how did you? So my first interaction with blockchain also was like buying a little bit of Bitcoin a few years ago, right? But like, how did you then transition from that to like a more deeper role of like a product role or like doing design and that kind of stuff?
Right, even at my design role. So I've been kind of like. So interestingly, in my last role as a designer, which was like nearly 2 years ago, right, at Cancer Aid, right, before I went into crypto, I was working, I was working alongside this product manager called Ben Wirtz, and essentially like, he told me a lot of things about product management, and I actually like kind of like joined the company because he joined the company, right, leaving from the previous one. Like the previous company I was working at was Code. We were doing like educational data, right, and basically, how do we like help high school kids and university students gain more skills outside of school, right? And essentially, we're building this platform, and we initially worked together for a few months in the beginning. Then he left, and I worked on it for a couple other months. And he was like, hey, I joined this project. I'm like, I learned a lot from him, right? And he was pretty much he helped me guide my product management and product thinking, right?
Yep.
And yeah.
Cool.
And yeah.
So he brought you into the Cancer Aid project?
Yeah, correct.
And what was but there was no blockchain or Ethereum component to Cancer Aid, right?
No. So essentially after that, right, so I was actually like building my products myself, playing with random things. I was thinking a lot about startups and, how do we like build products, and I was pretty engaged with what I was doing. And then, coming into like encountering cryptocurrencies and all of this, right?
Right.
And blockchains and just like, I was insanely fascinated by the computer science, right? And coming from a non-technical background, I've always interacted with engineers and I've always been insanely fascinated, right? By the engineering side of things.
Yeah.
So when I encountered it, I started just reading the white papers and I started asking questions like, what is a blockchain, right? It's basically computing distributed systems, cryptography. I started going deeper down the layers of abstraction, right? And I went, for the first half of like 2018, where I went full time into crypto, was me self-studying, like getting a bare minimum, like appreciation of what like discrete mathematics was, and how that applied, and statistics, and how that applied to how cryptography is constructed, right? And to how computing, right? And how that abstractions apply to that to create computers. What is an actual computer, right? What is the internet, right? How do these computers talk to each other over the internet?
Starting with the basics.
Right, yeah, like going through, I kind of like delved down this rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
And then I, just like explored everything I could, right? And try to learn as much as I could about computers, pretty much.
That sounds a lot like my own journey down this rabbit hole in 2017. Where did you land? So to catch us up, like to the present,
right.
Like what have you worked on as a member, as an Etherean, or as a member of sort of the blockchain crypto Ethereum community?
Right. I mean, for the first half of the year, right, of 2018, I couldn't really work on anything. I was pretty much useless. I was grasping at everything and everything around me, right? And it took me a long time to orientate myself. But like basically, like after like 6 months of like 60 to 80 hours a week, just reading and doing things, right, and playing with things, I was like, okay, I'm starting to reach a point where I want to start doing things, right? So I started to contribute to different projects, right? I helped, and I was sent to EdCon, actually, in May 2018. That was when I met you, right?
Yes, I remember.
Yes. And at that point, the only thing I really could talk about was cypherpunk history, right? Because I wrote like a 60,000 word essay series on like before Bitcoin, like the history of cryptography from the
Wait a second. Oh, we have to dig into this for a second because this is super interesting. Tell us a little bit more about that, and like if you're comfortable sharing it, I'd love to include that here in the show notes so people can like check
definitely.
it out.
Like, so when I was going through and learning about computing, right, cryptography and privacy, right, I realized I guess the progression of privacy and understanding privacy is heavily like intertwined with cryptography itself.
Absolutely.
And cryptography became publicly unveiled, right? Like by basically, cryptography before the 1976, before like, new directions in cryptography by Diffie and Hellman were released, right? Cryptography is completely in the dark, funded by government entities. They basically kind of open source like the idea of, not the idea, but they open source the strong cryptography, right? The idea of public key encryption.
Yep.
And essentially, that was when I was learning about like cryptography, I started looking at the history of it, right? And I was deeply fascinated to the point where I couldn't stop talking about it to anyone I could find in Sydney, right? Back then, I was living there, and I decided to write about it, and I wrote. I spent a whole month full time just writing the 60,000 word series on I realized that Bitcoin was not just one-off invention. It was 40 years of accumulated work starting from the 70s, starting with key cryptography.
Yeah,
right?
look, like any advanced technology, it doesn't spring into existence from nowhere.
Absolutely.
Someone else I spoke to, I can't remember who it was, told me that in their own journey, they read the Bitcoin white paper, and then what they did was there's like something like 11 or 12, 14 references in it.
Right.
So that person went back and like read those references and then read those things reference, and that's where you land. It's kind of the 60s and 70s, a lot of this foundational work.
Absolutely, right. And that led me to, the work of, Diffie, Hellman, and Merkle. That led me to David Chaum, Metadata, and his papers. That led me to, the work of the cypherpunk folks in the 90s, right? The EFF, all those guys, and that led me to 2000s privacy wars, P2P technologies, the rise of that era. And, my main point of writing that essay series was to communicate, right? Actually, to communicate that to communicate the perspective, the historical perspective of where we are. And it's not, and this rolling series. And actually, right, I actually wanted to turn this whole series into a small book, right? It's public, but I unlisted it and you can still see it, right? I'll link it later. But I actually wanted to.
Yeah, you should turn it into a book. I love that idea.
Yeah, I wanted to make it a small book that you can read in like 3 to 4 hours. And I actually emailed, Martin Hellman, right, about chapter 1, the 70s, right? It was like 20,000 words or something, or 15,000 words or something, right? And within an hour, he replied. I was like, I lost my shit because Martin Hellman actually replied to me, and he actually went into the document and edited everything and moved things across, and it's like, hey, this is
that's amazing. I was just going to say, I don't know if you're anything like me. I don't follow pop culture at all. Like I could be having at a table next to Taylor Swift and I wouldn't know who she was and I wouldn't care. But I met Nick Szabo at an event last year, and I met David Chaum at an event this year, and I lost my shit. It was exactly the same. I was totally idolized these amazing thinkers, like the cypherpunks.
Right. Yeah. And I think the historical perspective gave me insight into how important this work was.
Yeah. Right. So I love that we're talking about this. The historical perspective is so incredibly important. I've been thinking myself a lot about and talking to people about things like political philosophy. I'm literally, trying to get smart on blockchain governance. I went way back to the beginning, at least in the Western tradition. And I have been studying, doing a crash course, reading Plato, reading Aristotle, reading Machiavelli, kind of all that theory stuff. But so this is like you were saying before, Bitcoin, as the first mover in the blockchain cryptocurrency space. Yeah. Well, it's not the first mover. That's the whole point, right? It's founded on this tradition. Right, exactly. There were all these other projects. But what I was going to say is there's all these other threads that lead into it, these interdisciplinary threads. And absolutely the privacy, the cryptography stuff is one of them. I cannot agree more with what you're saying, how important it is to have this historical perspective. So maybe this is the beginning of a project here. I'd love to work with you on trying to publish this and get it inside the heads of our colleagues.
Right. I've been trying to get someone else to work on it because all my time is tied up with Metacartel right now. It's actually on GitHub, so anyone can take it. Yeah.
So let's look at that and talk about that later. That's so interesting. I didn't even know that existed. So again, I love this conversation series brings these things out. But lest we not talk about Metacartel in the present, why don't we dive in? Why don't you introduce Metacartel? Tell us what it is, how it got started, what it's trying to do.
Right. So Metacartel, I don't really know how to describe it right now. I guess it's a group of people who really like each other and trust each other.
That's a great way of describing it. I love it.
Yeah, it's really like a guild, I guess, of people who really like each other, trust, want to work with each other, collaborate with each other, help each other out, right? That's really the best way of describing what it is, right? And within this group of people, we're working in various projects, including the Metacartel DAO, right? Where we're funding applications to experiment with new use cases and UX improvements, right? Advancements. And, there's a group working on a Libra bridge, right? A Libra Ethereum bridge to get wrapped to Libra on Ethereum. There's a group working on, changing and experimenting with DAO UX and, usability, right? There's a group working on meta transactions. I mean, Metacartel initially started as a group to work on meta transactions, right? Meta transactions is essentially a UX solution that allows people to send transactions to basically execute transactions without needing any gas, right? And essentially how that works is that instead of sending the transaction to a blockchain, they send it to a server, a relay server, right? Which executes it for the user. And that's essentially how it works, right? Just like someone else executes.
We did the first conversation in this series was with Austin Griffith, and of course that's an important part of how the burner wallet works. So we were talking about it with him as well.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's so important from a UX perspective. It's one of those things I think universal login, right? That ABSA came up with. These I'm just going to call them UX primitives are I think what we need to cross the chasm and make things more usable to mainstream users.
Yeah. And that was Metacartel it was originally called the MetaTX working group, right? And during the first community call, we were like, how can we collaborate with each other to build maybe an interoperable decentralized relay network, right?
Got it.
We decided to vote on the name, and there were several names that were up for contention, including Metacartel, El Cartel de la Meta, There was, the Tesla network, because we were like, it's gasless transactions, so like
I love
gasless.
it. That's cute.
No,
That's great.
and then there was a few other stupid ones, right? But apparently, El Cartel de la Meta came out, and then people didn't like it because it was hard to say, so people just chose Metacartel afterwards. And yeah, and then the logo we have right now, the dance in Chile, that was created during like ETHSF in October last year, drawn by Frankie from Dapper right now.
Dapper, yeah.
Yeah, and he's a great illustrator. We just met him there, and he was like, "Hey," and he was like directing him to how to draw it. It's like
It's a cool logo. I mean, it's funny. Like when I asked you what Metacartel is, you were like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a group of people who like want to support each other, want to work together, like each other, et cetera. Yeah. Like this is true for a lot of the things that I contribute to as well. Like Ethereum cat herders is just one example.
Right.
I usually use the word meme because we don't have another word, right? It's like, there's a reason that this humans of Ethereum, I put a hashtag in front of it. It's a meme. And it's like, mostly it's been me interviewing awesome people who happen to be my friends, but like it's permissionless. Like you should take this hashtag and just like the EIP0 hashtag we created, early last year for like governance stuff, and like build something else on top of it because it's like a shared commons, I think is the word for it. So I guess maybe Metacartel is a similar idea.
Agreed. EIP0 is a great meme. Like I've been trying to get people to run another EIP0 during Berlin Blockchain Week, like maybe the week after.
Yeah,
that should happen. I don't know.
That'd be very cool. That'd be very cool.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about the piece of Metacartel that everyone's talking about is of course the DAO. So tell us about that. Like what is that and what's that intended to do?
So
and how did it happen, Peter?
So earlier this year, we kind of like the Metacartel solved like decentralized meta transactions. Tabuki solved the research problem, and then earlier this year we went down to implementing it, right? And so Metacartel essentially had solved this problem around meta transactions. And we had nothing to really work on. And then the thing is, at that point, I didn't really think too much of it until like ETH Denver, right? I wasn't going to be at ETH Denver, but people started asking for a meetup, right? Like the previous year, we started this culture of like just having meetups, online community calls, and we kind of liked each other and hung out with each other in the process, right? And essentially afterwards, right? Like earlier this year, we weren't working on anything. And during ETH Denver, people were like, hey, let's meet up. Let's do a meetup. And at that point, right? And then, Ramon from Zeppelin volunteered to run the event along with Drew. Right. And I was like, at that point, I realized that's when it immensely shifted to me. Like, became apparent to me that Metacartel had built up a very strong inner community culture, right? And that was powerful in of itself. And I looked at, this, and I was like, what else can we take this community, right?
Yep.
What other problems can we solve? What impact can we do with this culture now, right? And yeah, and I guess one of the things we wanted to really push was like get more people building dApps, right? Because we believe that infrastructure was here. We could build really exciting new dApps with protocols and UX infrastructure, and you could scale them up, right?
Sure.
And essentially, and like at that time during April, I really wanted to join Moloch because I initially dismissed it. James Young previously before it launched was like, hey, you should fork it and run with it. And I'm like, whatever. And then when it launched and coordinated, around 200K back then, and then they started working through proposals, I was like, whoa, this really works, right? This is really cool. And I want to see and join that governance experiment. Everyone joined for 100 ETH. I don't have a lot of money, so I only have 10 ETH. So I was like, that's like a month of my living wages, right? I'm like, fuck it, I'll do it for the science. And then, so I proposed to join, and apparently, I was not able to join because everyone voted no. It was like a 50-50 split.
It was very close, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but you have the dubious honor and distinction of being the first person. I was going to say first and only. I don't know if there was a second rejection, but yeah, first person rejected from Moloch DAO. So yeah, you're not sufficiently evil enough, and you don't eat enough babies, I guess, to join Moloch.
Yeah, I didn't have enough ETH, I guess, So, when in the post-mortem call for Amin, right, he was like, hey, why don't you just like run with Moloch DAO, fork it, right? And run something with Metacartel. And then I was like, that'd be hilarious. Let's do it.
So, right. So then you also have the distinction of being the first person to successfully fork. Well, I don't know. It hasn't launched yet, has it? So let's just say.
Oh yeah, it's launched. Yeah,
it is.
We
launched
it 40 days ago, and we have around 750 ETH inside of it.
I have been on another planet or under a rock somewhere, so I missed that. That is really exciting. Congrats.
Yeah, no, I mainly didn't publicize it until recently because I was just mainly been scared of it like crashing and failing. Right?
Under promise and over deliver. That's totally the way to do these things, right?
Yeah. Like I basically didn't announce it because I was like shit scared, right? But yeah.
So my understanding of Moloch is that, so obviously it is a sort of a, what is the word for this? Coordinated action. It's designed to solve the coordinated action problem, something like that, of just people coming together and pooling their funds and funding the public good, right? Funding like infrastructure. And in the case of Moloch, it's intended to fund ETH2 work, if I remember correctly. So what is the Metacartel DAO intended to fund, and like how is it governed?
Basically, Metacartel is a straight like copy of Moloch DAO with
The code.
same configurations, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And essentially, it's governed the same way. People pledge money, they get equal amount of shares back, right? And people just vote, right? There's no quorum. Just majority vote wins, right? And Metacartel DAO is focused on funding. Basically, it wants to fund the next killer application, basically, right?
Okay. Whereas Moloch is intended to fund sort of layer 1 stuff, you're funding layer 2. That's one of the main differences?
Well, not only layer 2, we just want to fund applications. Anything to do with usability, advancements, UX experimentation or new use case experimentation, we want to fund that. We want to discover how can we use Web3, how can we leverage Web 3.0 technologies and primitives, right, to create unique value for people that have never existed before, previously with Web 2. That is exactly what we want to try to discover and find.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest problem we have today, actually. Not ETH2, not anything else. I believe the number one thing that is a barrier to basically building important technologies for people is discovering how can we use Web3 in important and valuable ways, right? Or entertaining ways, or even meaningful ways, right?
Got it.
I think this is the nut that is not. This is a problem that isn't straightforward, right?
Sure.
There's no path forward to it. It can only be solved by experimentation.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree, and I think that's an argument in favor of decentralization, right? It's not like we have like the Web3. What was I going to call it? Like the central coordinating committee that's like a group of fat cats smoking cigars, saying, "Okay, see here, we're going to allocate. This group is going to do this, right?" Like the whole point here is we want this explosion of experimentation, and we want to let 1,000 flowers bloom.
I'm actually not that interested in decentralization and like censorship resiliency. I think that's great and that's a plus, right? It's great that my money can't be taken away. But I think there's many aspects of Web3, right?
So what aspect of it? So what aspect of it excites you? Like
I'm very, very interested in the composability of dapps and protocols.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in interoperability and the fact that you can transfer value and money and information and data, right, from one data network to another, right? The open internet of value, essentially. I'm very interested in this, right? And I think that people get, there's many facets to Web3.
Yeah.
Unstoppable money is one of them, and unstoppable DAOs and organizations, that's one side. But I also think, DAOs are amazing for like surfacing information and coordinating people.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really...
Humanity DAO is an example, like where it surfaces this great list of like humans, right? It's an information empire.
I think I love that you brought this up because you're absolutely right. The aspects of like blockchain and Web3 that most people highlight first are things like censorship resistant, unstoppable money, right, is sort of the first thing. That's like the Bitcoin thing. And then we have like the applications and the organizations, which is where, projects like Ethereum and Aragon come in. But you're right. Actually, the open data is a big part of it. And that's just kind of like, that's just by design, right? Like the whole point, like one way I like to talk about these things is that in a Web2 world, the data is centralized in private databases at Facebook or Google or whatever, In Web3, the compute has to come to the data, right? Because you sort of own and control the data. You can encrypt the data. And basically, those smart contracts are running on every node rather than there being like a central, server that runs the smart contracts, or so that the compute is not centralized and the data is not centralized either. I can see that. Have you guys actually funded anything yet in Metacartel? And if not, like, what do you think might be the first thing to get funded?
Right. So, well, we just had our second, our third ever, DAO members call this week. We're going to have the next call next week. And essentially we're closing out on what exactly we want to fund first. We've had some strong consensus over certain projects, such as the Mint Base, the NFT minting platform that's helping out Metacartel Demo Day. So
Cool.
we have a conference in Berlin, 1 day conference, right? Well, our tickets are NFTs, and
That's so cool.
buy them to attend, right? And so it's almost like right now we're going for the initial like the first DAO members call, right? We basically, we're like, okay, what does everyone want to get out of it? Alignment, just like understanding everyone a bit, right? Second call was like we overviewed like all the different proposals we kind of sourced over the last 2 months. I was like, what are we really interested in, right? And we narrowed in and like soft listed, whitelisted a few ones we wanted to flesh out, some proposals we want to flesh out, right? And this week's call was maybe going over the more fleshed out ones and being like, do we want to yes, no concerns, right? Diving deeper into them. And we've like formed consensus over certain proposals. Some proposals we haven't, where we've disagreed and we realized it's a good fit. It's almost like we're stumbling around what we collectively want to fund, right? And it's a really interesting process because a lot of the challenges I've faced is like encountered are like very operational, around communication and coordination. The main cost of running a DAO is truly, 90% social.
It's interesting because a DAO in its purest abstraction is literally nothing but a tool to make coordination easier or like less frictionless kind of in a sense. So it's interesting to hear you say like, and I also had the thought as well that like, in theory, the DAO is this piece of code that lives on a blockchain and it's governed through votes, et cetera, like what you're talking about. But in practice, a lot of stuff's happening off chain, right? There's like calls happening and meetings.
Absolutely.
I know that Moloch has done the same thing. So it's interesting to see how that's going to play out.
It's almost like you're starting with an architecture which you can pretend. My hypothesis is that DAOs are a great way to scale up the idea of a firm much quicker, much faster. I think it run quicker. It can be much more advanced, right? And it can surface greater quality of information and perhaps judgment, right?
Totally.
And one of the most, and I think that, it's still in the end, even though it's a different type of organization, it's still an organization. You need to build an organization just as you would build a company or a team, right? All the same aspects apply. And
totally.
There's nuances in how you operate it, right? But in the end, it's still people. And I think that it's not DAOs. Yes, they can potentially create an organization that's much more frictionless to run. But, I think that the ceiling is extended significantly or even endless, right? Like I think there's unbound, scalability perhaps, social scalability perhaps in DAOs. I don't know. Right?
We have more options. I mean, the point is we have more options. We have more tools at our disposal now. And, it took a very long time. It took hundreds of years for us to figure out how to run companies, right? So it'll probably take time to figure out how to run DAOs.
And I think DAOs have created concrete value today by enabling new forms of coordination.
Exactly.
It's enabled Wallet to coordinate $2.5 million, right? And it coordinated $200,000 overnight, and that would have never happened in real life with like real fiat money, right? Not real fiat money, well, just fiat money, right?
Can we call it dirty fiat money?
Dirty fiat money, right? So it coordinated that and made it possible. That would have been never possible in that time span ever in real life. That would have never happened realistically. It's too much friction.
Yeah,
but right.
I love these ideas.
That coordination.
So the cat herders is a great example of this. I always hold the cat herders up as this, I call it like the canonical DAO or the platonic DAO, right? It's an organization that would never exist on paper. It wouldn't make any sense to have it in this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction. We're spread out all around the world. It's totally unclear like what that structure would be or who would do it or how we would pay for it, but it exists as a DAO. We have an Aragon DAO. We have a multi-sig, which I kind of call like a, minimum viable DAO. And so it sounds like the same is true for Moloch and the same is true for Metacartel as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's great. Web3 is creating real value today. Like I hate people who are like, Web3 is pointless, vaporware. No, it's creating real value today with DAOs. It's creating real value today with NFT artwork through Super Rare.
I agree, but with one important caveat that I want to mention, which is that it's all still intrinsic in the sense that all the things we're talking about, whether it's Moloch, whether it's Metacartel, whether it's cat herders, they're all still inwardly focused specifically on Ethereum, on Web3. And yes, they're creating value, but it's still this kind of like intrinsic value in our community. Like what I think will be really exciting is when we'll begin to see DAOs that create value that's externally focused in the world, like people going forth and like, I don't know, doing like, humanitarian aid or something like that, or even just building a product that like other people are beginning to use. I
mean, yeah, like people talk about, how can we onboard people outside crypto into products? I'm actually starting to take on this. I'm playing with this like interesting, I think, perspective where how did we all get into crypto? We learned about it through the price we're investing. maybe like how many people have we onboarded through onboarding or actually education, right? Or like, teaching or abstracting products, right?
Yeah.
I think the former, basically, like, I think that blockchains and cryptocurrencies potentially have are possibly very, very viral ideas, and they're going to be onboarding people to the crypto space way quicker and way more efficiently than we can abstract, real products to people.
So you're saying maybe we should double down on the currency use case. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Well, I don't know. It's just like, I think that, Bitcoin and Ethereum, the ideas around blockchain, right, and NFTs and collectibles, maybe they're way more viral than we think they are. And maybe the idea by itself will carry the onboarding. And, maybe we don't, like, I just think like there's a lot of effort being put into abstracting products for real people, right, outside of the crypto space. But how effective is that? How realistic is that compared to the unstoppable force of just like this idea of cryptocurrencies and the fact that it will draw a lot more people in? Like, if I had to bet which kind of pathway will draw more people in, I'd bet on like the virality factor, and then bring more people into cryptocurrencies and fast dapps and fast DeFi and that flow, right? I think that, I'm a bit skeptical now, right? Of like, how well can we abstract it? Maybe this is the paradigm we have to exist in.
So maybe you're suggesting the product is, or the killer app is the money, where money is not just Bitcoin. Money is also the DeFi stuff. So like the infrastructure.
Trading is a new blogging.
Wow.
I think trading is a new blogging. I think I've always like struggled with understanding what the fuck is like, why people like playing around CDPs, trading, it never, like, DeFi never made sense to me because I never realized I never like think, like, no one ever like gained significant value or direct value out of DeFi. Like, it's always been a fascinating thing to me, right? That the fact that I didn't understand it, but I realized that what if, right, that, DeFi, like Web3 was all about value transfer, right? And that trading was a new form of writing stories through how you move value around, right?
Well,
and yeah.
I mean, I feel like Andreas Antonopoulos has talked about this. He called his book The Internet of Money, and programmable money, programmable value. I don't know. I can't put my finger exactly on it, but I do agree with you in one important point, which is like, it's funny, you mentioned blogging, right? Yeah. Like when I am explaining blockchain and cryptocurrency to people, I often like to start by, I say that like, this is not new, this process of like decentralization and like control being propagating out, into the broader population. And in particular, I like to highlight that it happened with things like power and authority, right? So we started with like kings and emperors and things, and then we moved to like an aristocracy model. And then, eventually we had things like parliaments and democracies. And so the power kind of like slowly propagated outwards. And it also happened with things like words and knowledge, right? And so, again, in the Western tradition, the church had like a monopoly on language and on knowledge, like before the invention of the printing press. And then the printing press was invented, and vernacular languages began to arise, and everyday people were handed this incredible tool that just completely reshaped human society, all the way up to blogging, right? Which and the consequence of that has been the collapse of national media and newspapers and things like that as a source of truth, right, around like information. And so the same process is now playing out with money and value. And so I agree with you very strongly that like, it's an apt metaphor. If you put the power of programmable money in the hands of the people, they will run with it and invent things.
Look, like, blogging was looked down upon. Blogging was a complete joke.
Yes.
But people made money off it, and it's become a huge, industry where, the top 1% make the most amount of money, and that's what drives, ad revenues, right? That's the same with entertainment. I don't see why not cryptocurrencies. I actually think I'm trying to come to this, conclusion that, blogging is just another activity, like, trading just another activity like blogging or moving value on Web3, and that is the killer application, right? That is, we've stumbled upon it, and it's going to be something that we put it in this its own corner and box, right, in our old world view. But what if in the next decade, right, trading is just like another sport like esports, right, or blogging and writing articles, creating a following. It's just another area that's just as big, right?
You're talking about it like sports, but it's funny. The metaphor I was thinking of was creative expression or artistic expression, right? The of like blogging or creating a website back in the 90s.
Writing a story.
Right? Yeah, you're like, I have this new channel through which I can like express myself to the world.
Right. And it's, I mean, you're writing stories, right? But essentially, but with trading and maybe moving value on Web3, you're writing a story with your actions and how you move your value around, right? I mean,
what you invest in, exactly. Yeah, it's
right,
inherently
exactly.
social. Money is inherently social.
Yeah. In the end, you're pressing a button and money's coming out of a computer. Plugging was that.
Magical internet money. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. It's happening, right? I mean, esports was this, right? It's inherently, it's the same kind of like input output.
On the topic of money, I want to make sure I ask about this because it's something I've been asking everyone in this series. How have you, let's just talk about Metacartel, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, how have you guys funded that project up to now? What has worked? What has not worked? Like, what are you thinking about doing going forward?
So we're all volunteering at Metacartel, right? And the DAO was the first amount of money we ever really touched and coordinated was some money, sponsorship money for the Metacartel demo day in Berlin. And then like the next encounter with money was like, was essentially with like the Metacartel DAO. And the intention of the Metacartel DAO is that, hey, we're going to give as much money as we can to actual people building dapps. We're not going to touch a cent of it, right? As much as we can. Like, I don't want to see like a cent of the DAO money going to me. That to me is irresponsible. That doesn't make sense, right?
So,
and I accepted that, really. And I guess like but we recently have got an unannounced fellowship of a project, right?
Cool.
For somebody. We'll announce that later on.
Cool. That's really exciting. So it's interesting. So it's very honorable of you, plural, you guys and girls, to decide not to fund your own work out of that DAO. I mean, it's again very similar to what we've done with like the cat herders, for example. No one's ever been paid to work on the cat herders aside from like small tasks we've outsourced or whatever, like people taking notes for things. But so like, is it sustainable? And I guess maybe to turn the question around, it's not so much about funding your own work. If you guys are comfortable doing this as volunteers, it's more like, do you think it will become a viable way to like fund?
Right.
Well, I usually use the terms public good and infrastructure, but if you're focused on applications, maybe that's different. So maybe a part of the question is, would you also fund like for-profit stuff or only nonprofit stuff? Right.
I know we're definitely funding for-profit and nonprofit both, right? I mean, the reason why we're like working on it is I'm full-time on it, right? I previously did some consulting, like 10 hours a week for half this year. And then like a fellowship came in just to cover the rest, right?
Cool.
But we have a few other people doing like 20 plus hours a week just on Metacartel, and then like 5 to 6 other people doing 15.
So people are working, that's like half time on this project and they're not getting funded by the project. How are they able to afford doing that?
They're essentially like they're building their own project or they're doing consulting or, et cetera, right? And the reason why at least I can speak for myself, the reason why I'm full-time on it, right? And I've dedicated an insane amount of time this year, most of my hours to Metacartel, is because I think that Metacartel is in a very unique place in position in this community. It's got a very interesting culture and community, right? And we're working on extremely exciting things, which I don't think I'd have another opportunity to work on ever again.
Sure.
To me, that is it's undeniably, why would I spend my waking hours doing anything else? And I've been trying to make it work however I could, really, right? And to me, the opportunity cost is not worth it, right? So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm accepted that if it's not payable work, it's fully volunteering. But I think, to me, it's something so exciting, so undeniably like needed to be like the Metacartel DAO needed to happen. It needed to happen, right? I could not foresee a future where it didn't, right? Or, it would have been absurd to me.
So here's the thing though, right? Like, people like you and I are relatively fortunate and relatively well off by global standards. And we have the, how do I put it? We have the good fortune to be able to like put our time into passion projects, even if that work is not necessarily funded or maybe not funded at market rates. But really this comes back to like scaling and social scalability and like getting more humans into this space. Because the reality for most people in the world is that's not a possibility for them. So like, how do we scale this? Or does it forever, is it forever a group of like, you know what I'm saying? Like relatively well off, largely like.
I think that, we're thinking a lot about how to generate revenue, how we can build sustainable businesses or sustainable models for Metacartel.
Sure.
That's something that's quite actively talked about, whether it's a venture fund, or creating a for-profit DAO, investment DAO, right? Or, through recruiting. I mean, we talk about it quite a bit. But I think that we're all it's strange because no one's complaining about the fact that I mean, not everyone, but like the core team or core group of Metacartel, I'm insanely grateful to be working with, right?
Yeah.
No one's complaining. No one's, and we all understand each other. We all understand why we're working on this, right? And yeah, like I think that we do need to drive our energy towards projects which have, value to be created, right? Yeah, I think that just like, I mean, this Metacartel is not a business. It's a community. It's an ecosystem that's taken a life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hopeful that through some combination of these things, of the Molochs and the Metacartels and the for-profit stuff as well, that like we'll figure this out as a community, and we'll there will be business models that emerge, but we're not there yet. We're not even close to there yet.
I'm okay taking the leap of faith. Like I've put checkpoints in place where I'm like, I should be like, at the end of the year, I'm gonna reconsider and figure out whether I should be putting more time into Metacartel or on something else, right? I put these checkpoints in place throughout the year, and I progressed so far, and I will probably make that decision end of the year to see where we're at. But I'm okay. I understand. Like I am almost making the bet that I'm gonna learn insanely exciting and interesting things if I invest my time into this project with no expectations. I'm willing to make that bet and take that risk, right? To be honest.
Yeah.
And I'm not only doing it out of altruistic behavior, right? Like I also believe there's a lot of interesting things and value that will be uncovered that I will earn, right? These earned secrets, right? By doing a lot, working a lot,
It's interesting the way what you're describing. The term I use for that is broadly I'd call it social capital, right? So like we're not maybe getting so much financial capital out of this work, but we are getting maybe knowledge capital. I don't know if that's a word. Intellectual capital, right? We're like learning things, and we're like
I'm learning a lot about DAOs, and like there's other experiments we want to dig into that I think like it's hard to understand or see when you haven't done or done a lot.
So to the extent that we believe that this is the future of human collaboration, which I know that you and I both do, like this is definitely something worth investing in.
I'm really bullish on DAOs, like on the power to surface information to coordinate people. I'm ever more like bullish. Yeah,
me too. Maybe, okay, I think we could probably do another hour-long conversation on the topic of DAOs because it's so interesting, but we're beginning to kind of, actually, I think we're like getting close to an hour. A couple more things I wanted to ask. The first one is a very open-ended, impossible question, which is like, what does Ethereum mean to you?
Ethereum that's a good question.
like what does it represent or what is it?
I think Ethereum represents like diversity and of ideas, projects, people. I think it's an extremely like colorful network of individuals all working on this thing, right? To me, that's what it is, right? I mean, Ethereum is it's been a selling point to coordinate everyone around this idea of creating an open internet, right? And I've gained quite a lot. Like I've gained so much from I think the main thing is like, it's all about the people, right? I'm honestly way more interested in people than technology, right?
I like that framing quite a bit. I don't think anyone's given that exact answer or even that type of answer yet. There's a reason I call this humans of Ethereum, right? I agree. It's about the people. I think Zach Cole said when we were beginning to put our heads together and kind of work on one of these, like another one of these new like open permissionless projects, he was like, dude, I'm just here because I like you guys. Like I want to excuse to like work with good people. I want to do so sustainably.
If Ethereum fails, it's okay. I've met so many great people I want to work with. Like it's like the people in Metacartel. I don't care if Metacartel dies or whatever, at community's end. I don't care if Web3 is a false dream. I want to work with these people foreseeably in the future. I'm okay with that. That's this is like, I'm happy with, this is what I get from it. I'm glad. Like,
cool. I agree 100%. Okay. No, thank you. That's a great answer. So I have a sort of brief rapid fire round that I like to do at the end. I'm just going to give you three final questions. So the first one is, what advice do you have for newcomers entering in our ecosystem?
Yeah, that's hard. I think Ethereum is a very cliquish community where if you don't have social capital, you're going to be basically ignored half the time, right? That was me in my first conference.
Yeah, me too.
I think
we all start that way.
Yeah. I think the advice would be help where you can, and just keep helping. Work on interesting things, and you'll attract interesting people. That's always what I worked for me in terms of meeting interesting people. And I think that's opened up a lot of things I could work on, like just by doing that. Metacartel tells that I never planned anything. I just started helping
Yeah.
and just started following contributions, right? Yeah.
I would just add one small thing, which is without expectation of anything specific, like just help, just it's kind of, this goes back to one of the Burning Man principles, right? Which is just unconditional gifting, right? You're just kind of like giving gifts to the world or to the community
Agreed.
without any expectation of anything in return. And when you do that, the crazy thing is that you get a lot in return. I think that's excellent advice. Like I did a lot of random stuff early on, like emceeing at conferences, which is kind of a thankless task, you know, or another good example is like note-taking on calls, which is like not the greatest thing.
Plus one, coordinating community calls, right? That's,
there you go. Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. My second question is, what other people or teams or projects should we speak to as part of this series? Generally, people that are a little bit less well-known or a little bit underfunded or underappreciated, but they're doing like really important work, like you guys.
I think I would say, you know, aside from Moloch, I'd say the Odyssey team. Right?
I'm not familiar with that. That's perfect. Tell us about that.
So the Odyssey team is consisted of these guys called Ben, Sam, and Deacon. They're from Denver, right? And they're kind of remote. They kind of joined the Metacartel, right? They embodied the Metacartel spirit from day one. They're like, we're excited about what you do. We want to help out. How can we help out? And they just jumped in and started building without asking for anything, right?
Cool.
And I think they're truly I'm truly glad to kind of work with them. And I think no one knows who they, it's like they're kind of this, no one really is aware of them, right?
We're going to make them famous by putting them on here.
I don't know. Yeah. I'd love to learn more about the story as well, right? Like,
So, I mean, there are so many of these people and projects and teams in our community. I posted the second of these episodes on just publicly yesterday as a podcast and a video. And I think I tweeted something like 2 humans down, many to go, you know? So I think we have to go exponential. So like, again, I would encourage you to like, why don't you interview them, use the hashtag, you know, you can post it, etc. Like, please like take this and run with it. That'd be awesome. Cool. And that goes to everyone else as well. My final question is, so this is the magic mic moment, right? So what is the one message that you would like to convey to the Ethereum community? Anyone who's listening or watching?
Jesus Christ.
I like, catching people unprepared with this one.
I mean, I'm insanely grateful for everyone who's, showing me support. I want to keep giving back to people in the Metacartel and people around me. I think one thing I'd like to say is that keep it fun and light, right? Don't take it too seriously. Like we're all gonna die. It's all gonna be meaningless. It's just a game, right? And keep it spicy.
That's fantastic. I love it. That should be the official or unofficial motto of Metacartel. Dancing chili pepper, right? Yeah,
definitely.
Amazing. Peter, thank you. This has been so much fun. I'm super excited to release this into the world and see what people think and follow up on some of those threads that we started pulling on, especially the DAO stuff. Maybe we'll, I'm doing this in seasons, and season 1 is this like underfunded, underappreciated people thing. Maybe season 2 we can dedicate to DAOs or something. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sweet. It was really fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed speaking to Peter. Tune in again next week for a new episode featuring an interview with Boris Mann. In addition to contributing to Ethereum core research and development and leading several of the recent Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians gatherings, Boris actually has a very long history contributing to open source projects from way before Bitcoin or blockchain or Ethereum. And so we talk about the origin and purpose of open source and what it means, and in particular, how to address issues such as tragedy of the commons to make open source more sustainable. It's a fun episode, so don't miss it. As always, Humans of Ethereum is completely volunteer produced and self-funded, so if you're interested in contributing to the project, there's information here in the show notes on how to do that. Have a great week, and I'll see you back here next week for the next episode of Humans of Ethereum.